Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and a very warm welcome on behalf of VLA Virtual Legal Advisory. Today, I've got a very inspiring, a very noble, courageous, and esteemed guest speaker, Advocate Tahera Hasan, who is the founder of Imkaan Welfare Organization. Advocate Tahera, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me here, Sana.
So I'm just going to call you Tahira, if that's fine. Basically, we are holding.
Absolutely, it's perfect.
Great. So basically, we are holding a series of webinars where I will be focusing on NGOs for the next couple of weeks. And the reason why I'm actually doing that is because on the surface, it appears that not much is being done to address the concerns and the issues with different segments, especially the underprivileged segments of society within Pakistan. And of course, I've had the opportunity to meet you firsthand, to listen to you just a couple of days ago, in fact, and we've been in contact on LinkedIn. And I have been in awe of you, and I'm so honored, that you're over here. And I'd like to actually begin by asking you that when you came up with this idea of Imkaan Welfare Organization, what were the reasons? What made you form this organization, and what does it stand for?
That's actually, a very interesting question and a long story. I've been working as a lawyer since 1996. I was working for a corporate law firm on the litigation side of things, set up my own private practice. I was doing that, focusing on entertainment law and on family law. And I went through some personal challenges in the process of adoption, in the process of adopting my children. And I just felt that the structures that were present in Pakistan, as far as the adoption framework is concerned, were not holistic in the sense that they were not addressing the emotional needs of the adopting parents and subsequently the children. And due to that, I just, felt that there was a need to set up something which was at par with international regulations, even though we're not signatories to any of the adoption conventions. However, it is possible to look at things in a more holistic way where A, the stigma of adoption, and B, the process of adoption can be made slightly easier and slightly more, warmer for the families involved. So that's how Imkaan came about, which was in 2012. And at that point, the primary purpose of Imkaan was to run an adoption program. So, Imkaan, of course, it means possibilities. And if you look at our logo, there's a stork in there, which has remained there to date because that was supposed to be dealing with children. So we started out in 2012. And at that point, like I said, the only objective was to, protect abandoned children, rescue them, and place them for adoption with forever families in a way that was nurturing and holistic for everybody. To that end, we started doing research in Machar Colony, which is where I work. Most of my work is now, in 2012. And the objective of the research was, coming from a place of privilege, I think sometimes you look at things in a certain way. And the objective of the research was that I presumed that, okay, this is one of the largest Kachi Abadis in Karachi. And therefore, there should be the most number of abandonments there due to the marginalization and poverty. However, after doing 2 years of research there, I was completely proved wrong in my assumption. As average family size there is 8 to 10 children. Nobody's abandoning their children by and large. And, but having been there on ground and having worked on ground with research at that point, I was completely drawn to the fact that there were so many challenges in the community. And I just felt that there was a need to do something there. So that is why we shifted from our adoption program to doing other interventions in communities, though we have run an adoption program to date.
That's great. Thank you so much for explaining all of that. I actually wanted to ask you that, you mentioned when we heard your presentation at the PIIA earlier this week, that the focus of Imkaan was on stateless children. And unfortunately, many people in Pakistan are not even aware of the fact that there are stateless children or individuals in Pakistan. What is their status? What's happening with them? So, would you like to talk a little bit about, those stateless children that you're looking after? Where are they from? And what condition are they in?
Actually, I mean, when we started working in the community at that time, considering the fact that I was a lawyer, I had also worked with human rights. And I had generally grown up in an environment where human rights, social justice, equality, social issues were something that were talked about all the time. And I find it very interesting that in my entire life, despite having the legal background, despite having the political know how, that I was not at all aware of the fact that we have a stateless population in Pakistan, or what does statelessness mean? And how does it impact people? What is the kind of issues and challenges people face in the course of their lives due to the impact of statelessness on them? And to date, I struggle with why this is an issue that has been so suppressed and not talked about. When we started working in this community, even at that point, I was not aware of the challenges that were there. Like I said, we began with adoption program, adoption research. We moved from the adoption research to we had a medical intervention. We ran a primary healthcare unit. We ran a maternity home. We ran and still do run a learning and recreational center for children. And other than the fact that there is marginalization and access to education is difficult for everybody, the one thing that kept cropping up for us was the lack of ability of people to go to schools or to be able to access livelihood on equal terms or to have employment that was secure. And it all linked back to them not having ID cards or not having pay forms or not having documentation that allowed them to access any of the basic rights that we have. And that is when I started looking at it more closely. And I think it was just a process of evolution of discovering what the challenges were. And when I say that we focus on women and children, and we do have legal aid centers also in high density stateless populations in Karachi in 3 locations. And we have dealt with stateless issues in depth. Now, just to give you a little background about how statelessness has come to the forefront in Pakistan, what the challenges are, I think it's important to understand that statelessness is very much rooted in 1971 and the creation of Bangladesh and the separation of East and West Pakistan. And at that time, we've had migrations of populations between the two, East and West. And there are people who have suffered not having their documentation in place or losing their documentation or having their documentation blocked due to the bureaucratic nature of having the documentation in place. And then there have been layers of ethnic discrimination against the ethnic Bengali population, and that has then resulted in its impact on children and adults also. So as everything in Pakistan is linked to your family tree, you need generational documents to be able to prove that you are a citizen, right? And therefore, there's a lot of children that we work with, and a lot of women that we work with, and a lot of men that we have as clients who are struggling with issues of identity. Now, just to put it in very simple words, I mean, stateless is somebody who is not recognized by any state. So they are invisible. I mean, they're often known as the invisible populations because of not having any rights attached to their status. So that is basically the population that we work with.
Thanks for explaining that. And am I right in assuming that apart from the Bangladeshi children, so that you don't have Afghani or any other nationalities?
Yeah. So I mean, just going to correct you there because they're not Bangladeshi, right? So if they were Bangladeshi, they wouldn't be stateless, right? So they're ethnic Bengali, more often referred to as Pakistani Bengalis. There has been documentation issued at some stage or the other to them. However, that's been revoked or stalled or blocked or whatever. We do not work with the Afghan refugee population at all, which is a completely different nature of challenges, and because they do have, in most cases, the refugee status. However, it's also important to understand that if refugees are left undocumented in any which way for a prolonged period of time, they can also be facing challenges of statelessness if they cannot prove their links to the state that they came from. So, or they are not recognized or given documentation by them. So that challenge can arise in that population, but our focus has basically been the ethnic Bengali, more so the Bihari and the Rohingya populations, who are all part of the migrations that have happened between the 70s.
70s and the recent years. I think the Rohingya must have arrived in recent years.
It's been more the 70s. It
Okay.
is no, it's been more the 70s. Recent years there've been fewer migrations. It's between 71 and 80, 81, 82. There was migrations from Bangladesh at one point for economic reasons, but people who came for economic reasons migrated, went back, right? The ones that are here are either the ones that were living here before 71 or the ones that came here in the 70s due to whatever reason and then just stayed. So we have the third, fourth generation of Pakistani Bengalis living here.
Okay. So, Tahira, when it comes to policies and legal policies, social policies, has Imkaan actually drafted some sort of policy? Have you submitted something to the government? What more is being done in relation to this?
Look, as far as policy is concerned, I mean, we've been doing a lot of advocacy work. I mean, that has been the key, driving force in the work that we've been doing. And a lot of it has been centered around different kinds of rights. I mean, for example, the right to education, which is constitutionally been guaranteed to all children. Our, contention is that in the existing legal framework, everything is already there. It is just an issue of implementing the law as it stands. And if we do implement the law as it stands, I think 80% of the challenges that these communities face will be taken care of. Now, if that you don't need to be creating or reinventing or having new laws in place, I think just purely by implementing the law in its letter and spirit, I think the resolutions can be in front of us. I mean, I'll give you an example of birthrights, which of having lived here since the 70s is another one of the things that comes up. And if we look at the landscape, it's not black and white in terms of you either have documentation or you don't, or you've never had documentation. A lot of people struggle with the fact that they have had documentation, or it's stuck in some loop where things are not getting resolved, or it's been blocked, or they've been discriminated against in some way or the other, or they might have, had their cards blocked for some reason. So these things, the processes are very tedious, and the resolutions take a very long time. A lot had to do with, I think, lack of awareness also. A lot of times people make mistakes in the documentation process that subsequently lands them up in a situation where it's difficult to, undo. So it's a multitude of, layers of gray, which we need to deal with to be able to get this resolution.
And could you, for the sake of the audience, could you highlight some of the more pertinent laws that cover this area?
I think, the most important one would be the Citizenship Act, right? Citizenship Act grants, multiple ways of getting citizenship in the country. And I think you've got birthright there, like I mentioned, you've got naturalization, you've got citizenship by marriage, and then you have one section that specifically deals with the migrations that happened and the separation of East and West Pakistan, which talks about having proof of having lived here in the 70s. And that, I mean, I think these are the four main ones. And then if we look at the other thing, is about fundamental rights. Now, whereas citizenship can be viewed as a political issue, I think think the issue of fundamental rights is fairly black and white as far as I'm concerned. When you look at the constitutional guarantees, when we're looking at especially right to education, the fact that we live in a state where your right to education is tied to your having citizenship, I think is something that is extremely disturbing, because that means that we are actively stopping children from going to school. Of course, we have the argument on the other side which says that, oh, but so many children don't go to school in Pakistan anyway. We have out of school population that is really, really large. The government schools are not being able to cater to or provide to all the people that are there. However, I think for me, it's an issue of, there's a lot of times that we will have rights granted to us by the states, but not have access to them, right? But then you have rights that are being held back actively. So even in a theoretical sphere, the fact that you're not allowing children to study, I think, is extremely disturbing. I mean, as I had mentioned that day also, I think one of the things that has happened is, after prolonged advocacy and talking about the issue, is that the federal schools have allowed, very recently, about 3, 4 months ago, children to go to school in the federal schools without having day forms. And I think that's a huge step forward. And I think the provinces should follow, because you can't be depriving children of education.
No, absolutely. And this, in fact, brings me to the other dimension that Imkaan deals with, and that is offering mental health services within the community. And I know personally, because I've been a part of NGOs that have been addressing mental health concerns, especially in such communities, that it is such a big challenge. So, please do explain a little bit about that service, and what sort of challenges have you encountered?
Yeah, I mean, the mental health project, I think, it's one of the ones that's, I mean, not that the other ones are not close to my heart, but that one's also extremely close to my heart, because I think, it was key to have it there. I mean, one of the things that you see is that when you are stuck in a loop of a situation where there is only hopelessness and there is no resolution to anything, and you are marginalized not just by poverty, you're also marginalized by the fact that you don't have documentation, and you're stuck in a pit of quicksand that's just going to take you under, right? So the way that children react with no access to absolutely anything is that they are disturbed. There's a lot of drug addiction. There's antisocial activities. There's every home has some challenge or the other, which is impacting everybody's mental health. Then the frustration levels, of course, and that's across the board. I think it's not just in underprivileged communities, but I think the add-ons of different challenges make it worse in many, many ways. Um, so we, while dealing in our legal aid project and while dealing with people in our maternity home, we found that one of the things that kept coming up was the frustrations. And a lot of times, and I think as lawyers that happens anyway, that a lot of times when you're dealing with issues that are sensitive, you end up being more of a sounding board than just providing legal services. And sometimes you are equipped to deal with it, and many a times you're not equipped to deal with it, even though I think we hone those skills as we go along with the nature of the work we do. But I just, we felt that the scale of the problem was so large that it needed a specific setup to be able to deal with that. Now, the challenges in that were the multitude, right? In Pakistan anyway, mental health help assistance is considered a stigma. When you're looking at community, and that's across the board again. I mean, that's from people who are well educated to the ones that are not. And when you're looking at the context in underprivileged communities, where there is a immense lack of education, literacy, and there are other norms that you can look at for facilitating people to deal with trauma, which is the spiritual form of relief which people normally turn to. Um, Talking about mental health was a huge challenge. We have worked, I mean, we worked in multiple ways. One is that we have outreach teams that go door to door talking about mental health and the challenges associated with it. And I think initially, if I look at the first year, we had a lot of doors shut in our face with people saying कि यहाँ इस घर में कोई पागल नहीं रहता. And that was the narrative that surrounds any form of mental health assistance. Is कि if you need mental health assistance, that means you're Bagal, right? And so we worked around that, and we worked with it, talking about the fact that everybody has frustrations, everybody has challenges, therefore, accessing any form of, and then also not understanding, when you're talking about talk therapy, people don't understand that either, because they're like, how are you going to fix us without medication, right? So that also becomes a challenge, because without medication, there is no resolution. So it was extremely challenging, but I think with the passage of time, we've when you've had results and when you've had people coming to you for one-on-one therapy, we'd also do group sessions. We work with families, we work with children and mothers, children and fathers, where relationships are sometimes, a lot of times, it's a communication gap. It's not understanding each other. It's not being in an environment where everything is conflict based, rather than trying to look at it in a different way. And when we had started having success with those kind of group therapies or those one-on-one therapies, then we had people talking about it more so in the community, and therefore we had more people coming to us. I mean, if we look at the kind of mental health program we run right now, I think it's fairly robust. One of the other things that did happen was that people didn't have access to drug rehabilitation centers, and drug addiction being huge in the community. uh, I think that was a very difficult challenge when you have clients that you're dealing with that have been suffering from or are caught up in the middle of a drug addiction situation. And how do you manage to assist them without access to rehabilitation centers? There was a homegrown rehabilitation center in the community that somebody had was running, who was in recovery themselves, and I think we provided support to them over the years in terms of psychosocial counselors going there and ensuring that they had some form of therapy. So, I mean, we also work with children. With the mental health component, and we recently launched something which I found, which has been really exciting. It's been intercommunity dialogues and intergenerational dialogues. And the purpose of intergenerational dialogues was to fill the communication gap between uh, people of different generations and the kind of challenges that they were facing. And I've been like really, really excited about the kind of feedback and the kind of results we've had when you've been engaging with mothers and daughters, or teachers and students. Or we also did one on mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws. And I think that the just to be able to communicate or look at a different way of communicating. A lot of times people don't even think along those lines, and I think that really facilitates the overall well-being of a community, or well-being of interpersonal relationships, which at the end is going to impact everything.
Hats off to you for all of these initiatives, because I can well imagine how tough it must be. And especially, as you rightly said, with the stigma surrounding mental health and the acceptance in Pakistan, irrespective of social class. So that is something great that you're doing. And I also wanted to ask you, for the sake of the audience, that if anybody just wanted to visit Imkaan Welfare, firstly, can they visit? Do they need to make an appointment? And secondly, what can individuals do, just laypersons? What can they do for your organization?
Well, I mean, we're very open to communication, people visiting. I mean, we're not into obviously you're not what you call poverty porn. So I mean, it's if somebody wants to do some work and actually is interested in contributing in some form or the other, it is highly encouraged. We have young kids interning with us from colleges and universities all the time, because we have a very wide expanse of different kinds of work that we do. So there's something for everybody. We do sports, we are teaching, we have, the mental health clinic, we had the maternity home, we had the clinic itself, then there was legal aid. So there's a mix. I mean, there's youth-based activities, there's vocational training, there's digital learning. So there's something for everybody to take part in if they want. I mean, the only thing that I recommend is that if somebody does want to give time, it should be consistent time, because changing faces is something that's, I mean, I'm okay with, that's what I always say. I said, even if you say I can come 2 hours one a month, but you do those 2 hours a month regularly, it really, really makes a difference. We've also had a lot of universities engage with us in terms of just for young people to understand the realities of what is on ground. So as far as engagement is concerned, if somebody wants to volunteer time, if somebody wants to, you know, donate something in terms of, we normally don't take food donations, and we take books, we'll take, anything that can help children study, sports items in the sports that we play, and any form of other, assistance that anybody can give. And I think spreading the word is important, just talking about the issues and breaking that's one thing that's really important, is breaking the misconceptions that surround statelessness and our perception of certain communities, which result in a lot of ethnic discrimination, which I think filters down across class. I find that a lot of people view these populations with a lot of distaste due to the history that's involved. And I think that's extremely unfortunate, because it impacts us as a society. So I think that is, if there is any contribution, I think talking about what the reality is and then trying to understand it and being more empathetic about the situation, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, I'd really like many people to actually know more about your organization, because it is one of the most, I mean, you're doing such a great job. And whereas many people are aware of it, I'm sure that there are many who are not. And I think that that might be because you're extremely down to earth. And yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that many NGOs are very flashy, but some of them can be very flashy, and they do a lot of marketing and things like that. But I think that with the substantial sort of work that you're doing, and addressing the needs of these children, who are in fact some of the most, they require a lot of uh, focus from us. Uh, I think that many people really ought to know more about your organization. And one of the reasons why I was asking was because I'm part of Rotary International, and I'd like to visit along with the other Rotarians, just so that we can talk more about the issues that you, and we'd love to have you as well as a guest speaker, so that you can tell other people who are not aware of the existence of Imkaan as to what you do, what you stand for, and what can we do for you. So, Tahira, I'm just going to move on with a few things. Can you just share a few success stories, that have taken place at Imkaan with the children, or with the women, whatever you're comfortable in sharing?
No, no, definitely. I think, of course, if we look at, it depends on if you're looking at individualized stories or success as a whole. I think one of the key successes has been through the facilitation of legal support to the community, where we've been able to resolve a lot of issues of a lot of people in the course of the work that we've been doing, as far as the legal interventions are concerned. There has been some policy change. There has been conversation with Nadra specifically, which has been very positive and has been facilitated over a period of time, because I think a lot of times it is just the fact that departments take a lot of time to do things, and people are not understanding what they're going for when they're trying to explain their cases to them. So I think that's been very, very good, and it's been successful. On an individual level, I think one of the important successes is that when we started our learning and recreational center, which was about 10 years ago, we started working with young people in sports. And at that point, we started doing gymnastics. I think that was and everybody asked me why gymnastics. And I was like, that's the only coach I found who was willing to come there. So, that's sometimes, a lot of things just happen because they just happen. They're not thought out, or it's just circumstances and fate and how it's supposed to be, right? So we had a coach who started working with us 10 years ago, and we had a boys team, and they were doing fantastically well. And but with boys in the community, the challenge, of course, is earning a livelihood. Idhar udhar ho jate hain, they get involved in their what their needs are. And so we were like most disillusioned that the boys would keep dropping out all the time. And at that point, the girls in the learning and recreational center, now you have to understand there's a very conservative community. They started saying that, oh, why can't we do gymnastics, right? And we were like, okay, we have no objections. Let's work on the girls. And then there was a process of, talking to the parents and getting permission and seeing what would happen. And when they started playing at that point, which was about 8, 9 years ago, um, they were, I mean, they were young girls at that point, 8, 9, 10, and we used to go for competitions, even though we were not, we're not a registered school, we're an informal learning space. And because they were from where they were, there used to be a complete and people used to look at them with pity and bring them juice and all the rest of it, and poor children from a poor community, which is something that I that really upsets me, because I mean the work that we do works on dignity, right? And I think that's really, really key, is that when you're working with somebody, that the dignity of the child is really, really important. However, with the passage of time, they have come forward as a force, and the team has one inter-school for 5 years running. And about 4 girls from our team was chosen to represent Sindh in the national gymnastics championships, which was something that was fantastic, because they were so good that the state had to take notice, and they said, okay, you can play for us without the documentation. Um, and they played at the national level, and they all won. The Sindh team won and came back with medals, which has happened twice. And I think that that is a huge success story, because just the whole trajectory of the girls and how they developed and what it meant to them and how they view themselves in these circumstances and the confidence that came with it. And, we at that point, we got a lot of media coverage as far as the girls are concerned, because with the passage of time, they've come forward as people who can speak for their community. Because I think it's really, really key that people should talk about their issues or deal with the kind of problems that they have themselves, rather than having somebody else speak about them. And that has been extremely powerful, because you have these young girls who have dreams, who want to get to places, and they are being held back due to their stateless status, right? So they can't play international, they cannot travel out of Pakistan, and they are just left in this limbo where there's no way forward. And that fight in them has been fantastic. So that's been one other success story. And the third one, which I think is really close to my heart again, is the fact that we have, seven, six, seven of the kids that came to us 10 years ago, who are now 18, 20, 22, who are now working with Imkaan, right? And for me, moving on, leadership is going to be from the community, and that is key, right? So that is, I mean, even though when we started out, there was no vision of, oh, 10 years down the road, these kids are going to be in a position where they can take leadership roles. However, that it has been the trajectory. And now 10 years down the road, 12, it's been 12 years. 12 years down the road, I can look at it in a completely different way. And I'm just like, okay, you guys better get your act together, because I mean, this is your this is your task to do. So I think that's something. The fact that we potentially have people in leadership roles, I think is key.
No, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, girls doing gymnastics from that community where, these sort of things are usually scorned upon, in fact, and boys or other people looking into leadership roles. Again, that is something that is quite revolutionary. So again, hats off to you for all of you for all of these initiatives. And before we come to an end, I wanted to ask you that what is next for Imkan? What other long-term goals have you planned for, in order to reach out to other families who are in need?
Look, I mean, as far as we're concerned, I mean, our focus, I mean, we've been working in Machar Colony for a while. The legal, and that's a population of 800,000 people just right there, right? And it's a huge, huge population. Most of our interventions are there. And we, moving on, of course, I mean, we do have legal aid centers in Kurangi and in Orangi, which again are high density populations. So if you're looking at stateless populations, there's about 126 across Karachi, right? And of course, it's not possible for us unless we have huge capacity to be able to reach everywhere. We do have linkages with 25 other communities who we've done trainings with, where we do trainings on rights, different kinds of things to be able to have young people who can resolve issues on ground themselves to the best of their capacity if they can, and then they link up with us. But in the long term, we would, in the medium and the long term, I think it's more spreading the nature of the work that we're doing into other communities that are impacted in the same way. The mental health program for me is key because it opens a lot of doors for people. We have recently worked on a digital training program, which has been extremely successful. And the way it was structured was that even if you don't have any literacy, you can still make a livelihood out of learning things that are being taught, from photography to videography to everything that under the sun. And we would like to do more of that capacity building. And I think the development of youth, a lot of the work focus has been with kids, but a lot of it is also shifting towards the youth now, because that is where the gap is and that is where the need is. So basically replicating or doing different kinds of interventions that give the youth the opportunity to be able to come forward into doing something, having some kind of a skill set, despite the fact that they are held back by the challenges of not having identity. I think that is key for us.
Tahera, thank you so much once again for taking the time out, for being here. It's been a privilege for me to have you over here and to talk about Imkaan. And I look forward to actually visiting Imkaan personally. And I hope that other people as well do so, and especially those who are not aware of the challenges that stateless children are facing. I think that this is going to be more of an awareness session for them to know that these are the ground realities and what more can other people and other NGOs do to contribute. So thank you so much. And for the audience, if anybody from the audience has any questions after listening to this webinar, they can reach out to you, Tahera, on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, wherever, anywhere.
And for more information, you can visit our website www.vla.com.pk. And Tahera, we look forward to having you once again as a guest speaker at some point as part of VLA. To talk a little bit more about the legalities and the legal framework, because it's just so important for people to know about all of these things. And these are the sort of issues that are not usually discussed. So thank you so much once again. And sorry, if you'd like to say a few things before we.
No, definitely. No, thank you so much, Sana. I mean, it's been a very good conversation. And I think it's really important to understand that these issues exist globally. I think that, and it is not just in Pakistan that they're neglected globally. I think the issue of statelessness has been one, because it is deeply linked to political issues. It is one that is often neglected. And it just dehumanizes people who, should not be, nobody should be dehumanized. And I think it's really important to understand that statelessness has to end in the world. We have to ensure that every child that is born to an identity, because that is the way that the system is going to work and be able to facilitate them. The fact that nobody should be deprived of any rights. And I think one of the key things to do is put ourselves in that situation where you don't have an identity card, say in Pakistan, it's not possible for you to function. You actually, everything is linked to your identity card. And I think that if we remove that from our lives, it's going to be impacted in ways that we can't even fathom. So I think one of the things to do is put yourself in that hypothetical position of not having an identity card. And I think a lot of things will become clearer to you as to why people should not be deprived of their identity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tahera. And we wish you and we wish everybody at Imkaan welfare all the very best. And I'm sure you're going to do great things, greater things, in fact, for the community. Thank you once more.
Thank you, Sana.